Andrea. Thank you, all of you, for coming. To start, I'd like just to ask a question. So, what are the 3 main phrases that most Americans know in Spanish?
Hola. ¿Cómo estás?
After hola?
¿Dónde es el baño?
Before that, una cerveza, por favor, right? That's the reason.
Taco Bell.
After cerveza, you need something to eat, right? Un taco, por favor. And then after the cerveza taco, don't stop baño, right? So tonight we're going to talk about another word. It's actually an acronym from my new book. It's actually a book in Spanish. It's a 5-step process to digital marketing. It's the word for success. EXITO. There are probably a lot of things you guys are already doing in your work, but I'm going to share with you a few of the case studies. Some of them are from Latin America, some are from other parts of the world, some are actually from U.S. Hispanic marketing. But what I hope to share with you tonight is things that you can take away and not only learn about great content marketing, but also how to expand virtually into other parts of the world. So my company is called Latino Link Advisors. I work with companies and organizations like, mostly on the West Coast, but hoping to work with more companies here, but companies like Flipboard in Silicon Valley, Idaho Dairy Commission, to help them get into Mexico and Latin America, develop communications and digital marketing strategies. So my co-authors and I, we're actually giving all the proceeds of the book to the nonprofit One Laptop Per Child. They plastic solar-powered laptops for kids in the low-income areas of the world. So doing amazing work, getting internet access. So we all know the 4 Ps, so place, price, product, and promotion. But we wrote our book, and so much of it is about content marketing, and those are the case studies I'm going to share with you today. But we felt that there was really a need for a new marketing model. And why is that? Because we all know innovation is so important. We need to move a lot quicker, come up with new strategies sooner. Technology is changing, right? We all know the social networks evolve. Data, how we measure marketing results is changing. In fact, chief marketing officers, I think, today are spending more on average than chief information officers, chief technology officers. We use technology to listen to conversations online to inform us what we're doing and how we're going to create content strategies. And also we know the importance of content for being kind of a glue and a magnetic force for creating communities online. And another thing too is I think the demographics of America are changing. We know, I think, by the year 2050, minorities will become the majority. So in and of itself, I think we already have to think kind of internationally or about other cultures right here. So that's what inspired us to kind of create our new model. And so let me walk you through that. So again, éxito is the word for success in Spanish. And the first letter is E, escucha su audiencia, so listen to your audience. We're going to see a great case study about how listening can inform your content strategy. X, experimente como usuario, or experiment as if you were a user. Put yourself in the shoes of the user. We're going to see some fun examples of people companies that didn't do that. I, integrate your communication channels. Make sure your call center and your social website, offline stuff are saying the same thing. T is transform your audience into communities. And again, content is the key way to do that. And then O is optimize. So let me share with you a case study from a book about listening to your audience. And it's a case study from Mexico of 3M, based in St. Paul, Minnesota. They make the Post-it note. And it was interesting. This is a very successful marketing campaign that actually started in Mexico, but it was so successful they're actually rolling it out in countries around the world, including the US. So when they're listening in Mexico, they did this listening study, and they're thinking very with the blinders on, kind of looking for people using Post-its in a business application. But when they started really doing the listening on social, they realized people like taking breaks from work, doing fun artistic projects, Steve Jobs in the window, or jokes on Friends, right? Or having fun with, Pac-Man in the window, looking out in the parking lot. So what they decided to do was, hey, let's take this idea and create, they called it the muro post-it, or the post-it wall in English, and let's actually tap into the people's desire to do something creative. So they actually brought the idea into their own website and empowered their user to create post-it walls of different designs and have a competition where people could win trips and things. And again, it was so successful in Mexico, it's now rolled out all through Latin America, I think starting in the US and rolling out in Asia. So a great example of how to use listening to inform your content strategy. I always like to close this section with two quotes from folks that were around long before the internet. Malcolm Forbes, founder of Forbes magazine, and Dale Carnegie, who wrote the book How to Win Friends and Influence People, and it just shows the power of listening. Seduce almost anyone, ask for and listen to his opinion, and so many companies want to win friends and followers on their socials. So from Dale Carnegie, be a good listener and encouraging others to talk about themselves. So the second step of our process of our book is X, which means experimenta como usuario, or put yourself in the shoes of the user using profiles. How can we create profiles to understand user needs? And this section of the book is inspired by, do any of you know Dan Ariely? Who's Dan Ariely?
He's at Duke, and he studies decision making.
He studies what?
Decision making.
Decision making. And as you can see, how we make decisions irrationally. Do you know anything about his background? So, interesting story. You can see on his face here, he has a scar. And when he was 18, he was in a severe fire and was 80% of his skin was burned, and he had to be in the hospital about a year and a half. And it was interesting because in watching the behavior of the nurses was what actually informed his life's work. So even though the nurses were supposed to actually take care of him, he noticed that they were really, they preferred to remove the bandages quickly because they themselves didn't want to vicariously experience the pain. But from his perspective, and the folks in the burn unit, it was really psychologically healthier for them to remove the bandages slowly. Again, so this is what informed and got him on this track to studying psychology and how we actually behave. And when you look at companies' behavior, it's really not different at all. I mean, companies have to hit their quarterly numbers. They want to appeal to people, but they want to achieve their goals, but individual consumers or consumer groups, they want to just get their problem solved. So how can we actually utilize kind of this psychological research to create profiles? If you look at Forrester, Forrester, the research company, one of the ways that they've done it in their social media research is created a social media ladder of different types of people and how they use social media. So this is one example of how we could potentially create profiles. So on the top you have kind of maybe the Uber creators, people who are creating video or blog posts, conversationalists, people who are actually promoting it, listening, talking, the critics, collectors, and as you kind of move down the ladder, you have the inactives, or people who are spectators who are just looking but not commenting or liking or anything. So in our book we talk about, in this step, how can we actually define our goals, our messages, and our distribution strategies for our content using kind of these profiles, right? And here's a cartoon from the New Yorker that highlights the importance of avoiding monolithic thinking. Here's a cartoon of some Republicans after Obama won and the Republicans lost. Miss Davis, get us some binders full of Latinos. People don't live in binders, they are actual people. Again, a way to really help us understand real people. So in this, specifically for international, how can we understand content and how it be distributed or translated? And that's called localization or translation. So how can we actually translate or adapt or transcreate? In other words, translate while adapting that to other cultures. A couple of basic lessons here, I think. Sorry, this is a little blurry, but one basic lesson is, how can we actually help people find that content? Many companies, unfortunately, use flags, but when we sit in the shoes of the user, if someone who speaks English from South Africa or New Zealand sees this, this doesn't really mean anything to them. Or same with the Spanish flag. Someone here in the US or someone from Mexico who speaks Spanish, that Spanish flag is something totally foreign. So again, avoid using this. Instead, use something like what IKEA uses here, which is outlining essentially languages by country, and you can see the languages written out. So one way to actually organize your content is to have it, your content management system organized by country and then by language. Now, even though IKEA has done such a great job with their localization, and they do a great job, they do have one funny example of a mistake. Everything else is translated perfectly, except in, where are they from, Sweden?
Yeah.
If you need a workbench in Sweden, it's called portable.
We got a wardrobe from IKEA, and it's called a dumbbus. Yeah. It was on clearance for like $50.
Okay. So a great example of how to really, the importance of making sure things are translated and adapted well, hiring people from their country of origin we were trying to target. And lots of other great examples of that, poorly translated. This is a real sign. Instead of connecting people, connecting movie. Anyway. Moving on to the next stage, integrate your communication channels. I think we all understand the importance of making sure your social media and your call center and so on are saying the same thing. But we talk a lot about how are your teams communicating and how you actually organize. How is your organization? How is the structure set up so that you're communicating? Probably the first way that many companies get into international is actually through Hispanic marketing, where you actually have content in another language. And one company that's doing something really interesting is PepsiCo. And most companies, when they do Hispanic marketing in Spanish, they'll have a separate team, separate budgets, separate websites. But Javier Farfan saw that that really wasn't working, and so what he's done is he's actually set up his group to actually be cultural advisors, where they actually work with the brand teams to bring in influencers from multicultural America. So in this particular case, hiring people like Pitbull and Sofia Vergara that will appeal to Latinos, but then also people who are bilingual, so that you can do commercials in both English and Spanish. So a very different organizational approach to setting up your international and multilingual content. My wife's not here, but I've actually taken this to heart. And my wife is from Mexico. She unfortunately couldn't be here, but you could say, I guess, that I've integrated Mexican and Hispanic marketing into my own life. Here we are at the book launch party in Mexico. And unfortunately, she can't be here tonight. She's in Mexico working on a project for Saba. where she works. The fourth step for our process is T, transform your audience into communities. So what exactly do we mean by that? Well, essentially, we're here, and Andy's organized this meetup group because of content, right? Content is that magnetic force that people search for online, that people share on social media. So I'd like to share with you some examples of why that's important. But I guess first of all, I'd like just to say, when we actually think about content, when we think about growing up, it's really about what do we remember most? It's the stories that were read as children, or maybe stories from the Bible, movies, Winnie the Pooh. These are how we remember life's lessons. So how can we actually use storytelling in our content strategy? But when you think about business, it's actually the same is true there. I like this quote from Peter Drucker. He's an author of over 30 business books. And when he was asked by Fortune magazine, Mr. Drucker, you've written 30 business books. What's your favorite business book? And he said, actually, I don't read business books. I read Shakespeare, because that's actually how to impart lessons about leadership and the things to do or the things not to do. And when we actually break down a Harvard Business School case study, it's interesting because it's actually written similarly in that the CEOs and other leaders of a company are actually characters in the story. And that's how we remember great case studies, is they're written like stories. So I want to share with you, speaking of stories, and how can we actually use that in our own communications? I'd like to share with you a case study from it's a division of PepsiCo, Gamesa. They make cookies and crackers in Mexico. And there was a social meme, you could say, of two boys playing, one teasing the other one. I'd like to share with you two videos. The first is a video of this video that became extremely popular. And I guess you could say it kind of reflects the style of humor in Mexico of how they tease one another. And we're going to see what happens. But then we're going to watch the second video, and we're going to see how this division of PepsiCo actually turned that story and made it into their own story, including their own kind of brand characters. And by the way, how many of you speak Spanish? Any of you speak Spanish? Okay, well, not entirely necessary, but you'll get the idea. Eduardo, let's take a look at the next video here to see what Gamesa did.
emperador que llevas dentro.
So, what's interesting is, they've really created a storytelling strategy where the brand is an emperor brand of cookies and crackers, and the emperor helps the underdog. So they saw this online, and they actually found the kids, hired them, reenacted it, and told their own stories. But when you actually see their commercials, you see, you see a nearly identical storyline of, a damsel in distress, losing her parking place, and then the emperors come in and then help her, get her parking place back. So anyway, it's a storyline that they repeat over time.
So the first one was actually just a viral video that a couple of kids put up on the internet.
Exactly, a viral video
professionally done.
that became popular just because of the way that the kids were, like their kind of northern Mexican accent, and the way he was saying "dude," and the teasing, and Gamesa, or Emperor Brand, jumped in and actually saw that, say, this is our story waiting to happen. So they hired the kids and remade the movie. Totally different industry in fashion. Actually, I don't know how many of you are familiar with Art of the Trench? It's one of the oldest kind of social media and marketing campaigns. It's probably been around 4 or 5 years. I think it's a great example of how to create something that's more visual than where you don't have to worry about text or translation. It's a website from Burberry. They hired the fashion blogger, the sartorialist, to actually capture people in their Burberry coats. And if you look at the faces, I mean, these are people, and when you click on the images, you can see these are people from New York or Dubai or London, from all around the world. And just a little simple navigation on the right where you can search for different looks, different types of trench coats, styles, men or women. But a great example of how to maybe, if you don't want to get into all the text, all the translation, all the languages, how to do something, have a content strategy that's more visual, which I think, obviously we know about how popular things are like Instagram are, how to do something more visual that might fit on a mobile phone instead. Pictures with 1,000 words. So the fifth step of our Exito process is optimize, and we all know how important it is, but I'd like to share with you a story of kind of what I've learned about optimizing. And I guess you could say this segment of our book is inspired by Sir Winston Churchill. To improve is to change, to be perfect is to change often. So in the past year, I've had the opportunity to work with a company in Palo Alto called Flipboard. And any of you use the application? Great, so a few of you do. And what we do is we work with publishers, media companies, to help them optimize their RSS feeds for mobile screens. And Flipboard serves as, I guess you could say, an aggregator of content, so then you can look at all the headlines from various news sources in one place. But what you see here is they do an incredible job of optimizing news and information for the mobile screen. Again, a picture's worth 1,000 words with a simple headline and the source of where it's from, whether it's The Guardian or the BBC or the Huffington Post. So I've been working with them on their kind of international expansion and reaching out to publishers. And we launched our Latin American content guide that saw such a demand from people in the US that wanted Spanish language content that we actually created a US Latino content guide, knowing that it was a bilingual audience, but that people who, for example, liked the Pumas soccer team in Mexico or Barca in Spain are going to get a lot more news and information about those soccer teams in Spanish than they're in English. So that's why we work with some of these news sources to kind of create something unique for the US Latino audience. And another screenshot here from those lifestyle channels where we bring in content from Latina Magazine, Variety Latino, and other bilingual content. But I think the main thing that we learned is just about the importance of tapping into influencer networks and their specific passion points. So I think probably the thing that we realized worked the best is to work with influencers. In this particular case, a journalist from CNN, Ismail Kali, is like the he has a very popular interview show on CNN. Adel Cotto's on Univision. Ana Flores wrote a book about being a bilingual parent. called Bilingual is Better, and Chef Pepin. So I think tapping into those influencer networks to really have local content that appeals to the audience you're trying to reach works exceptionally well. Two final examples of optimizing, and again, it's not about necessarily optimizing maybe the website or your mobile experience, but perhaps even your retail experience. Here's a retailer in Brazil, a fashion retailer, C&A, that actually optimized their hangers so that people could vote about what particular piece of shirt or jacket they like the most. And here you can actually see the likes from Facebook.
Where was this?
In Brazil.
Where was the display?
In their stores in whatever, Rio or Sao Paulo. Again, it's showing data from a promotion that they had on Facebook in Brazil. But again, how they optimize the retail experience.
So they didn't actually press it right there in the store?
No, it was data from the Facebook page, but then that appeared in the various stores in Brazil.
Well, they could have done it actually there in the store. All they had to do was take out their phone.
Exactly.
And one of the things I noticed is they don't have a QR code on there, so they could actually do that from their phone.
And you know what? Maybe they did, but the way I understood it is that it was, through Facebook on their phone or on a computer.
I think it's stronger to be able to do it online because not everyone can actually get to a store, so you have more ability to like something. So you can see it online.
Yes. One other interesting kind of example of great content and how to rethink or optimize our content is, I think we all know how to push content out on Twitter, but here's a grocery store called Gallina Blanca, White Hen, that did something really interesting with Twitter. They actually created an algorithm to, so that when people tweeted the hashtag, I want a recipe, quiero receta, and what they had in their refrigerator, it would automatically deliver back a recipe with those ingredients and some suggestions of what to buy. So how can we make information and content as more of a value add than just, something like read this? So that brings us to wraps up the 5 steps of the Éxito process. So Escucha Estudencia, we saw the 3M case study of Post-it notes, how to actually listen for content ideas, create the Post-it note wall. X, experimenta como usuario, so put yourself in the shoes of the user. We saw some crazy examples of poorly translated stuff and the importance of hiring someone from your local market to understand the translations. Integrating your communication channels, so having your internal advisor helping you to figure out what's going to work best, like we saw with PepsiCo and their multicultural. Transforming your audience to communities, we saw the case studies from Gamesa or Emperor brand and the Art of the Trench from Burberry. And then O is optimize. One other thing before we, so I guess you could say, E is like the research kind of phase, what's going on. You have kind of 2 planning phases about profile development and integration or kind of organizational planning, and then you essentially have 2 phases of launching and maintaining.